Good morning to the Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, online viewers, radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM and respective radio stations island-wide. I'm Rolika Roach and welcome to the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021. At this time, I would like to invite the Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Sylvia Jacobs Suggestive. Prime Minister Jacobs, you have the virtual floor.
Thank you, Rolika. Good morning to you. Good morning to my colleagues. Good morning to the media present. And of course, a hearty good morning to the people of St. Martin tuned in and who will follow this during the course of the day. I must notify that our Minister of Justice is in Parliament this morning, as well as there being notification of illness from our Minister of Health, as well as Minister of Finance. I do believe Minister Doran will still be joining us, and Minister Tayas had a meeting also this morning. So I apologize for their absence, and I would like to update the Council of Ministers, and I thank Minister Samuel always for being here. As you may know, on Monday I was in Parliament to present the country packages, while Parliament had requested a meeting on the COHO as well. I asked for a postponement, mainly so that we could gather more information as relates to the country packages. Where we are right now with the COHO is that law is still being reviewed by the Council of State. From what I have heard, it has been back and forth from the Kingdom Council of Ministers to the Council of State, and as such, we as a government of St. Martin have not been updated. Nothing has changed since my last update on this in December with the Parliament and the people of St. Martin. Always when there are any new developments, I will always be the first to come forth with that new information. As such, the country package was presented, what had been approved by the Council of Ministers last week, and that was the priority document, which is being discussed in this week with the temporary working group that has come to St. Martin from the Netherlands. It is a group of 2 persons that is supported by the Dutch Representative's Office and their support team in the Netherlands virtually. So only 2 persons traveled for that purpose, and they are meeting with all of the stakeholders working with our country package, namely our monitoring committee, our secretaries general, as well as the secretariat of the Secretary General platform, which is the structure we are using to coordinate all of the measures that have been proposed. And the document I presented clearly elucidated not just the measured, which was very generic and general, and based on, let's call it, assumptions by the Netherlands, into objectives that are befitting our current situation. So when you see the document, if you have followed the meeting online on Monday, or if you go back to that meeting, you will see that it is clearly the Dutch version of the measure, the priority, or shall I say the objectives as defined by the St. Martin, the ministry and relevant department of that ministry. What we've also done is highlighted areas of collaboration and cooperation within ministries. So that I did not present as yet, based on the fact that that is still being worked out in the week, together with the persons who are supporting via the temporary working organization from the Netherlands. After this week's meetings, we will then be able to assimilate that information, and in the next SG platform, get an update from them, and that will then be forwarded to the Council of Ministers. So within 2 weeks, we will be able to then give another update to the people of St. Martin. One thing I also presented was that the package is presented in 8 sectors, touching all the ministries, and we have priorities that have been set by our country, and we will be working on preparing the implementation agenda, which is due on April 1st. That implementation agenda will not just have the objective, but also what resources, where we are in the process already, because that, based on the assumptions made in the measures, we were already far along in certain areas or had already started, done some research. So for the majority of the implementation, it is assessing where we are now and then what human as well as financial resources will be necessary to be able to execute it with a timeline attached. So that is what the implementation agenda will look like, and I look forward to being able to update the Parliament as well as general public in about 2 weeks on this, in advance of our April 1st deadline. Also in updates, I can mention that the steering committee of the trust fund is meeting this Friday on the 5th of March. Together with myself, I have been invited as well as the state secretary to take part in a short part of that meeting. Mainly, the Dutch government is concerned about the status update on our airport and the emergency debris management project. As such, the steering committee will take a decision on the draft roadmap that has been presented 2 weeks ago, and why we as government asked for a postponement of the meeting that was planned for then, so that our Ministry of Romy could give its input into the feasibility of the execution of the draft roadmap. So that is basically my update for now. Oh yes, we did have an emergency meeting called with our minister. Well, they came to the government building, some workers at the airport, together with union members, and they were able to meet with the Minister of TIA to express some of their concerns as it regards to the operations of this government-owned company. I would like to remind the general public, because I believe there are some very loud speakers in the media who are under the impression that government can unilaterally take decisions in government-owned companies, whether it be at the operation or the supervisory board level. Specifically with the airport, there are layers of governance. As a government, we are committed to improving corporate governance across the board, but specifically, the attention has been placed on the airport, and all stakeholders are working together to ensure that we have the best possible setup and monitoring, as well as support for these options. Things cannot happen ad hoc. We have to go through a complaint process from the ground up. So that has to go through the operating management, the supervisory board management, before it gets to the holding. And only when it's at the holding can government then have some input as to what happens. But basically, in good corporate governance, the operations of the company cannot be in the hands of government. We do monitor. We are, of course, responsible for certain aspects, especially where the airport is concerned, where safety, etc. And that's where the Minister of TIAD comes in. And hopefully she will be able to issue a press release on this matter in the coming days. But we continue to look to ensure that there is proper management at all our government-owned companies. And with that, health is not here as well. We are still doing the rollout for the vaccine. And if there are any questions that I may be able to touch on, I'll do so, as we did receive an updated report from our collective prevention services in our Council of Ministers yesterday. Thank you, Relaika.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs, for your opening remarks. If you've just joined us, you are watching the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021. Thank you for joining us. We now move on to the question and answer session. But before we begin, I would like to inform that the Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Dr. Anders Rudolph Samuel, is present, however, will not be making any opening statements, but is available for any questions the media may have. The virtual floor is open, and Lyndon Brown of BCN TV, you have the virtual floor.
Good morning to the people of St. Martin and the ministers that are present here today. Question to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, so let me be specific. It's a little introduction and a question. Prime Minister, I saw you took the vaccine, and do you aware and know that there have been any consequences that persons that took the vaccine end up in the emergency room at the hospital?
No, unfortunately, Mr. Brown, I have not received any updates as to anyone having negative effects as a result of the vaccine. And you did mention, yes, I was able to take it, and I have had absolutely no effects, no pain, no fever, no side effects whatsoever. My elderly uncle, who is 76, also did not have any side effects. This Pfizer vaccine has been deemed the safest for the elderly, and I believe that is why in our priority grouping, the elderly, it's being used with this group of persons. And as far as I've been updated, we have had over 5,000 registrants and more than 1,200 persons that have been vaccinated already. And there has been no reports of any negative side effects that have come to government, at least. Some of the normal side effects that people would have would be some type of soreness in the hand. And anytime, for instance, when you vaccinate a baby, some babies get some fever, some don't. Some feel a little poorly, some might have some pain. And that's the same side effects that they expect that some persons would have as a result of the vaccination, but I cannot personally attest to have had any.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs, and thank you, Lyndon, for the question. I would now like to invite Bibi Shah of SMN News. You have the virtual floor.
Good morning, colleagues, Prime Minister, Minister Samuel, good morning. Prime Minister, that's a little bit of encouragement so I could go take my shot, because I'm scared of needles. All right, my first question, Prime Minister, just last week, a set of guidelines came out from the Ministry of Justice regarding the residence permit and the requirements. What I'd like to ask you, Prime Minister, has your government considered or have taken any decision with the increasing of minimum wage so that applicants for residence permit can meet the requirements of immigration?
Thank you for that question. Unfortunately, our Justice Minister isn't here, and she is in Parliament dealing with this exact topic. So I'm sure if anyone after this press briefing tunes in, they will be able to get it directly from the minister and her support staff as to where that number came from, etc. What I can update on is that the ministries of TEAD, VSA, all those related are looking at, you cannot just ad hoc raise minimum wage. It affects everything. So while it is the intention to address cost of living on St. Martin, it requires a complete strategic plan. I do know that the Minister of TEAT updated yesterday in COM. We actually approved an advice as a Council of Ministers related to having a study done on pricing on St. Martin. So cost of living has to do with pricing, it has to do with rent, it has to do with utilities, all of that. So as government, we cannot take one decision that negatively impacts others. So there has to be a proper study done, whereas the cost of living is discussed. I can tell you from my years back in Parliament, the number 4,000 guilders used to be thrown out. I cannot tell you right now if it was something from an authenticated body that did the research or not, but government has indeed not determined what the poverty line is. And in order to talk about raising the minimum wage, you need to be able to determine what the cost of living actually is, what are the drivers of that, get controls where that is concerned, and then if the minimum wage is not sufficient, then that has to be adjusted. Because if we just adjust that, that will also negatively affect prices for those persons who are utilizing minimum wage to keep their prices where they are now, if that's the excuse they're using. So we cannot make ad hoc decisions. We will be looking at this strategically from all the ministries concerned.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs, and thank you, Bibi, for the question. I would now like to invite Jeffrey Sokran of Isle 92 Radio. You have the virtual floor.
Thank you, Alika. Good morning, Minister Samuel. Good morning, Prime Minister Jacobs, and good morning to my fellow colleagues in the media. Madam Prime Minister, if I might ask you to comment a little bit about this and how you think we can kind of stem the tide or change the tide, if you will, as it relates to the vaccine. we hear amongst certain parts of the community that skepticism remains high. And I know that various members of the media, as well as various members of the Council of Ministers and members of Parliament, are all doing their fair share to try and encourage people to register. But right now we've got about 57,000, a little less than 6,000 people registered for the vaccine, and that's far less than we need to achieve any type of herd immunity. How do we change the skepticism? How do we get people to realize that this is a good thing for our residents and our citizens and our fellow St. Martiners to do?
Yes, Dr. Sock, thank you for that question. It's amazing to me that people, let me just say that people are still registering. The registration, some people think that because we said only elderly and medical professionals in the first phase, that they're not registering yet. So I'm going to use this opportunity with this question that you've asked to encourage all persons who are interested in the vaccine or who would like to take the vaccine to register from now. You will be called when it is your turn. Once the vaccine rollout project team ascertains that we are out of the group that is the elderly and the medical professionals, then the announcement will be made and that we're doing others. I did hear them mention, and the update from CPS did say that the public rollout, so the public who is 60 plus, can now be vaccinated as well. So all of those, even though you're not 60, you are still allowed to register. The good thing about registering is we received about 8,000 vaccines. That has been made public. That will vaccinate about 4,000 people. We're receiving a next batch in 3 weeks. However, if we cannot show that we need the amount, then they would not be sent, because these vaccines are quite sensitive and you have to use them within a certain amount of time. So they're not going to be sending vaccines that are not, let's say, spoken for. So no one needs to worry that, oh, you only have 8,000 vaccines, so I'm not going to register. Register as much as possible, only once, of course, and ensure that once you get the call that you are able to come. As I mentioned earlier also, based on the registrations, they also have people on waiting lists that can fill to finalize the vials. I think I explained that the last time. There are about 6 in a vial. So if the amount of persons who are scheduled to come don't show up, then they will be calling backups to come so that we are not wasting any vaccines. So I want to take this medium. Some of you are saying, I want to wait until more people are vaccinated to be able to take this vaccine. Millions, and I mean millions of people around the world have already been vaccinated with this same vaccine. So even within the Caribbean, even if they're using AstraZeneca or another type, they are also vaccinating throughout the Caribbean. And the Caribbean is actually, doing better than some other developing countries in receiving the vaccine. So we are getting it. We know we need it to create that herd immunity so that we can reopen our country. And I know even in our discussion yesterday, the minister was looking at, Minister of TIAT, that is, was looking at our numbers and is going to be having the discussion on relaxing some of the business closure measures moving forward. So that decision has not been taken per se as yet, but based on the fact that our numbers are going down and the vaccines are taking place, that we are looking at going back to a more normal way of having the businesses be open. But I would like to encourage the people of St. Martin, if you look at the news all over the world, it does not mean that we stop masking. It does not mean that we stop washing our hands and having the proper etiquette, because the virus has not gone away. The best ways to kill the virus or stop it from spreading is to continue to wear your mask, continue to have proper hygiene, and keep a safe distance from people you do not know or is not in your circle, or wear a mask when around those persons. Yes, I see you cleaning your hands, Dr. Sock. It is indeed, even when you have the vaccination, like I do, I only have the first dose. After the second dose, you would have some level of 95% protection. from getting the virus and getting ill to the point of death. So it is not that you would not be able to get virus at all, you just would have minimal symptoms. And actually, many people on St. Martin, the current, or like say the majority, have not had major symptoms. Or if they had it, it was for a few days, it was manageable, and they are now well. Our hospitalization numbers remain super low. I don't even think there's anyone, or if there is, there's one person in hospital at the moment. So I continue to pray that we stay safe and do everything we have to do, and register today for your vaccination. It is safe. I even listened to Kamala Harris this morning, and she said she's also encouraging the persons in the US, because even there they consider that the turnout is low. Don't be afraid. Even if you're afraid of needles, I did not feel anything.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs, and thank you, Dr. Salk, for the question. Members of the media listening and viewing public, I would like to inform that the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, the Honorable Egbert Duran, is present and is available for any questions. We now move on to the second round of questions. Lyndon Brown, you have the virtual floor.
Question to the Prime Minister again. Prime Minister, I don't know if you're aware that there's some disappointment amongst the civil servants with their salary cuts. I know, Prime Minister, for you alone, you don't want to hurt the civil servant, but the condition that the Dutch gave to the government of St. Martin, they emphasize on the ministers and Parliament that they should cut, because for years the Dutch was saying that the ministers' salary is too high, and that was their emphasis. Is there any proof that the Dutch didn't really want the government of St. Martin to cut the civil servant salaries, the benefits?
I think you're already making some statements that are erroneous. Government has not cut our civil servants' salaries. Rolika, you're a civil servant. Did we cut your salary? No. We cut benefits, Mr. Brown. We cut vacation days. We cut vacation pay. So that's not salary. We had a huge presentation to our civil servants.
Minister, I said salary. I said salary and benefits.
I did not hear you say benefits. We did not cut salary. So you need to stop saying that, and anyone that is saying that needs to stop saying that. We have not cut salaries. That has always been the goal of St. Martin. We were asked to cut 12.5% of our personnel costs. And they did not see it as if we had over budgeted and we weren't able to hire persons. You couldn't cut FTEs or vacancies that were there in an effort to cut 12.5% of your budget. They wanted your actual cost for that year cut by 12.5%. So those demands were heavy on us. We did not agree with those demands. We did cost-cutting measures on our operations. We brought down the cost of telephones. We brought down the cost of our vehicle use. We brought down the cost of gas. We are working on streamlining processes so that people can get service faster. We're doing what we can without cutting into the operations. They said cut 12.5% of your personnel costs. So what it costs you to maintain your personnel. We went the way of the least disturbance, the least pain. It will hurt, yes, because I remember what it was to be collecting 3,000 guilders and having to save for my mortgage or save for my child's school fees. So I know persons do count on their vacation pays, some of them not to go on vacation, but to cover certain bills. And I even, with the salary I have to make payment plans for my insurance. And we all, I think the Minister of Finance said it very well, we all need to, as government also, promote financial literacy among our population on how best to budget for yourself so that you're able to do the things you need to do in time. We were raised with that. We were raised with save to be able to purchase, save to buy furniture, save to buy appliances, save to buy a car, save to buy a house. Now we're taking 100% loans for everything, and that is detrimental to your financial capacity. You understand? And banks are giving you these loans. So financial literacy is something that as a government we're also working on, so that we as a people can get out of debt as well, without putting ourselves in debt from very young ages. A lot of the students have student loans that they have to pay back, and they come back and they start at the lower end of their pay scale, and they have time to grow and learn and grow in their salary earnings. I've told people I am now 52 and I came into the organization at 23, and my salary as a teacher at the time was 2,350 guilders with a bachelor's degree. So things have changed, cost of living has gone up, but salaries have also been adjusted. And what we're doing, even as our priority before these packages came in, was assessing the salary scales, was assessing the jobs, the descriptions, and the personnel department was charged with ensuring that we could make sure we have the best people in the best places, motivated to do the work that is necessary to serve the people of St. Martin. So while I thank them for their understanding in the cuts that we have had to make, they are not going to be forever. We have to get ourselves back on our feet financially, economically, and then we can stand firm in saying that we have to compensate our persons as per the law, that we will then pull back in so that they will get what is due to them that has been cut in the meantime. But I reiterate, we have not cut salaries.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs, and thank you, Lyndon, for the question. I would now like to invite Bibi Shaw. You have the virtual floor.
Thank you, Relaika. Prime Minister, Minister Doran, good morning, welcome. Mr. Doran, I'm going to ask you a very vague question. I don't want to give too much information, but very vague question. After the shareholders meeting with the board of NBGEBE, what steps have government taken to rectify the situation there? As of now, as we are speaking, there are some serious development in this government-owned company. And I'd like to know what step has government taken. Prime Minister, you were speaking about cuts in salaries just now. And I'd like for you to chip in and tell me, after ministers or Prime Minister, after you took cuts, because ministers had to take their 25% cut, if I'm correct, are you taking home 37,000 guilders a month? Because if that's the case, Minister, I'm coming by you. I'd like to know if ministers are taking home 37,000 guilders per month, and if this is a situation that should allow directors of government-owned companies to take home this kind of money.
Good morning, Rolika. Good morning, Prime Minister, members of the media, and especially good morning to the people of St. Martin. With respect to the question concerning the shareholders meeting, there was no shareholders meeting. There was a Council of Ministers meeting with third parties, which the board of GB and also the temporary manager was present at the time. We were busy in the last week and a half collecting all information from both parties to ascertain and address certain issues that were brought up in this meeting. And I rather not divulge now until we have a full picture of the entire situation, but it does have my full 24/7 attention. It is not something that's being shoved under the rug. So I would say rest assured that it does have our full attention and is being worked on. And as soon as information that can be brought public, it will be brought public. Thank you for your question. And I don't take home 37,000 guilders a month.
If I may, Rolika, thank you for addressing that point, Minister Doran. We are public servants, and it really, I'm going to say it frankly, annoys me that people take assumptions as to what we take home. There was a lot of information divulged in the public as to the 130% Jacobs norm. And if you all can recall, after adding remuneration plus benefits, let's add it, remember this, plus benefits, it reached to 39. So government-owned companies cannot offer total packages of more than 39 at the moment. What we take home is closer to 11 or 12, 10, between 10 and 12, depending on what scale you fall in as a member of parliament, a minister, prime minister, chair of parliament. And depending on also what obligations you already have, just like any other person in a salary that may be coming off of your salary. So I really don't want people to think, because a lot of people are saying what the Dutch have said, we go home with $10,000. That is not the case. We get paid in guilders, and it is under the 12,000 guilders. And there are civil servants that also are there. There are other high councils of state, etc., that are also there. So the people of St. Martin, as a matter of fact, the high management in private sector are over that. Let's keep that in perspective. Let's keep that in perspective.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs, and thank you, Minister Duran. Bibi, thank you for the question as well. I would now like to invite Jeffrey Sokrin. You have the virtual floor.
Thank you, Rolika. Madam Prime Minister, I'd like to run this by you or ask you this question, only because I know both TIAT and Minister of TIAT and Minister of VSR are not with us. You had mentioned earlier that the Ministry of TIAT was considering reducing some of the regulations so we could kind of get back to normal, or start to head back to the newest version of normal, whatever that might be. Has there been any consideration to changing the travel requirements as it relates to our visitors, people coming to our shores? In other words, if folks can show that they've been vaccinated, will that be sufficient? Once we've done enough vaccination on our own shores, will we start to relax the travel restrictions, and will being proof of vaccination be considered valid for travel to our shores? Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you for the question. I wouldn't want to address what type of restrictions, what the travel requirements will be in the future. We have not gotten there as yet. What we have decided, discussion yesterday, within the Council of Ministers meeting, was that we would be, or the Minister of TIAT would be coming forth with some reduction of travel restrictions and or business openings. Those that, fall within, because she's in direct discussion with the airlines, etc. And based on what's going on in the places that we have restricted, some adjustments will be made there, as well as restrictions that we already have where business closures are concerned. The minister has the goal to move towards a more normalized opening hours for all businesses. So that's her goal, and she will be informing directly. So please do not take what I say to go tonight and remain open, please. The Minister of TIAT will, once the regulation has been changed, because the current regulation stipulates the new closing times or the adjusted closing times. A new regulation or a withdrawal of that regulation will have to take place. And so I ask the business community to remain vigilant as to the announcements that will come forth from the Ministry of TIAT in that regard.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs, and thank you, Dr. Sock. We now move on to the third round of questions. Lyndon Brown, you have the floor.
Question to the Prime Minister again. Prime Minister, can you say to the people that the government of St. Martin have satisfied with the liquidity funds from the Dutch? Is it working? Is it enough? Do we need more money so we can partly stable the economy of St. Martin?
Thank you. As it regards the financial support that we have received thus far, in January we received an advance on the fourth tranche, and assessment via the CFT showed that there would be no necessity for the rest of the first quarter, which ends at the end of March. So there will be discussions for the next tranche as of that would kick in for April. But yeah, we haven't heard anything further from the Ministry of Basic or the Ministry of Finance as it relates to any needs for the current moment. The next discussion will be for the fifth tranche, which will be for the second quarter.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs, and thank you, Lyndon. Bibi Shaw, you have the virtual floor.
Thank you, Rolika. Prime Minister, thank you for all the clarifications on salary and benefits, because I have that figure that you gave. I'd like to ask you, Prime Minister, yesterday we received a press release from Member of Parliament Emmanuel asking for clarifications and more information regarding the screening and appointment for the incoming VSR minister. I know we have 2 candidates now, we are in surplus. So if you can tell us how is it, or how it's going, how soon are we going to see a new minister of VSR? Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you for that question. Bibi, you know, if we were missing a minister, I could understand the urgency of people trying to get that information before it is ready. And even so, asking for the information before the process is finished is not, you're not going to get the information any faster. The process requires that the discussion is had internally. And once that discussion is had internally, then we can talk public about these things. One of the reasons from the beginning, I don't go into who is, this is all based on what the media and or the public has divulged. I have never divulged any of that information. It is internal information, it is confidential information, and I would like, you know, it's unfortunate that members of parliament feel the need to bring this forth in the media. It is not a process that requires that kind of external scrutiny until it is finalized. It is between the candidate and at this, in normal stages, it is the formateur, which I'm now Prime Minister, and His Excellency the Governor. And once that process is done, whether the candidate or myself and or the governor chooses to publicize, that is then to either of us purview. But I will not go into any details on that just because someone feels like, you know, making headlines every other day.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs, and thank you, Bibi. I would now like to invite Jeffrey Sokrin. You have the virtual floor.
Sorry about that. Nice if I could push the unmute button. This question is for Minister Samuels. I'm curious, Minister, if you could give us kind of some insights as to how our students are doing, how our children are doing from an academic perspective. Because, you know, when you look around the world, one of the things that has been most troublesome during this pandemic are, you know, students that haven't been in the classroom, and we're fortunate here that we're not in that situation. But how are our students doing academically? Are they starting to get beyond some of the COVID delays, if you will, in their academic performance that I think have been experienced around the world? How are we doing academically with our kids? Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Dr. Sak, for the question. One of the first things that I set out to do when we look at the possibility of going back face-to-face was to make sure that the students that are in the exam classes, that they were the first to go back in the classroom for face-to-face. And the reason for that was to make sure that those students that have to face exams would be the ones to get attention so that they would not build up a gap. Now, as we went along, and it depends on how much the situation was with the virus within the community, whether we had clusters or whether we did not have clusters, we did apply the measures of the education continuity plan. And the measures indicated that if we had a lot of clusters, we would go in the direction of distance learning. And if we had minimum clusters or no clusters, we would go in the direction of face-to-face. I visited a school this week. On Monday morning, I visited the Seventh-day Adventist school in Coal Bay. And one of the things that I saw is that there was room in many of the classrooms to bring back more students, while the school was still, using the system of staggered or hybrid. And I explained to them, when you do have big classrooms, and this was also written to the school boards, if you have a classroom that is large enough to bring back more students, you as a school should do your best in order to bring back more students. So this too was discussed with them. In discussions with some of the school boards, with the department, it was indicated most naturally that you will have gap formation or development with some students that are doing the staggered, which is the online. And we are busy looking at how we can deal with that situation. Presently, when I look at the reports from CPS, I can see from the reports from CPS that we do not have any clusters of the contamination in the community with the virus. And that means, according to the continuity plan, we can go to approach 4. And approach 4 is the approach that can allow all the students, quote unquote, back into the classroom. The only measure or a situation that I am looking at is a discussion with the public health officials, because if there are no clusters in the community, face-to-face is the best thing to do. So I guess by next week, I will have an update in regards to education on whether or not we will then definitely move to approach 4, which I would love to do, where we can have all the students back in the classroom face-to-face.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Minister Samuel, and thank you, Dr. Sock, for the question. As we do have 20 minutes left in our time, we will go ahead and have a 4th round of questions. Lyndon Brown, you have the virtual floor.
Question to the Minister Avrumi. Minister Avrumi, I know during the swearing in at the governor office, all ministers make an oath to serve the people of St. Martin. Minister, the reason is this, that sometimes people are unhappy that information have been holding back. Like, for instance, the bidding process. Minister, is it prime time now so you can explain to the people so that every person can get clarification, so people will not interpret your ministry out of context?
I think I understand what you're trying to say. Again, last week I gave a statement on this, and this week again I'll give the statement. I'm not holding back any information from the public. I made it very clear last week. Once we are dealing with public funds, it is public knowledge. There is a process that is ongoing, that is not completed as yet. For me to comment or give any hint or give an indication as to any comments or any rumors that were brought out, I will be hampering the integrity of the process. So therefore, again, I would urge you and ask for your patience as to when this process is completed. I will give a full presentation here, a sort of a short presentation here in the Council of Ministers press briefing, just to clarify, and if need be, go to the House of Parliament to explain to the representatives of the people. So I ask your indulgence in this, and I hope to have informed you sufficiently. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Duran, and thank you, Lyndon, for the question. Baby Shaw, you have the virtual floor.
Thank you, Rolika. There's so many questions you want to ask and so many things you want to get clarified. And I believe I might lose it a little bit because there are too many things happening outside there that I don't think government have a real handle on. But then let me go to something that maybe I can get some information this time. Prime Minister, when I asked you my first question regarding minimum wage, you gave a good elucidation and you said that a strategic plan or study would be needed before any such thing can happen. Do you know how long this will take? You said you voted on a decision just recently, or an advice just recently, put forward by the Minister of TF to check the cost of living out there. Can you tell us, how long will this take, this study or the strategic plan, whatever is it you need to be able to look at minimum wage, and also how effective is controllers? And I'm talking about labor controllers, because while there are labor laws in place and now we have some new guidelines for residence permit, we must admit, Prime Minister, that there are a number of businesses that are circumventing these laws. For example, if you're supposed to work 40-hour work week, before you can get medical, they don't give you 40 hours. They give you 25, 30 hours, making you a part-time employee. When that happens, no premium is paid to SZB. And in the end, the employees have no medical. So what I'm asking is if labor controllers are doing their job, and how long will this study take place or take before something can actually be done regarding minimum wage in St. Martin?
Thank you for the question. I think maybe, I don't know if you misunderstood me in what I mentioned related to TEAT. It is a study on pricing, on how prices are determined. So that would be one part. There's much more to be done. I don't have the full plan in front of me as to what needs to be done. As I mentioned, a lot of our government program had these aspects in there. Our discussions with the unions brought that up. So looking at the basket of goods, looking at cost of living, looking at minimum wage, all these aspects have to be looked at cohesively. I cannot tell you today when that plan will be ready. One or two of the country packages link directly to that plan or that objective that we have. So within the package of the Ministry of VSA and within the Ministry of TEAT, those things lie. The Ministry of General Affairs will be needed if there are legislation that needs to be changed, etc. The Ministry of VROMI will be needed if there is something that has to do with housing, etc. So whether it is in our governing program or the country package, with which I have mentioned our top priorities right now already align very much with what our own goals are, we will be working that out. But it will require studies. I know people don't like to hear that, but you cannot take any policy decisions without proper data and needs assessments. So that has to take place in terms of what is in place, what needs to change, and how it will change, and who needs to be part of that change before it can be divulged. And as it relates to the labor controllers, that's a question, unfortunately, you'll have to ask the labor minister when he's back. Or you can direct it to the cabinet and they can return in writing. Should I take this moment now, Rolika?
Yes, Prime Minister, go ahead.
Statements. I forgot to mention that we are in the month of March. And while February was a month where we highlight history of our people, and we have to do that because that part of history has been put down, kept down. Anytime you see somebody have a day, it's because at some point in history they were kept back or kept down. And so we celebrated our Black History Month. I encouraged in my statements at the end of the month to not make it a month only out of the year, but that we continue to educate ourselves on our own history and be thankful for the strides we have made and be encouraged to continue to make them to be treated equally throughout society, not just in St. Martin, but around the world. But March is the month of women. On the 8th of March, we will be celebrating International Women's Day. Because of financial constraints, I cannot go the route that I did in collaboration with the first Vice President of French St. Martin, Madame Valérie Damaso. We collaborated last year to do an award ceremony, which was very much appreciated by the women that we brought forth. Because of, let me just say, being busy with so many other things, the committee to put it in a more objective atmosphere. So it's not me highlighting or her highlighting people we want, but that there is a committee established to do so. We've been trying to host meetings with the women's organizations on the island, but it's proving difficult to come out in time to say it's done for the March 8th. So what we will be doing is through my cabinet, there are certain already celebrations taking place on that day. I encourage the people of St. Martin to send in recommendations. So whether it's picture, CV, and a short description, 1 A4, 1 letter size paper with a description of someone you look up to as a female, what the area of the functioning is, and what this person is special, should be noted as being special for. And throughout the month of March, we will be picking persons to highlight on a daily, weekly, and month, throughout the month of March. So as soon as we get those recommendations, we can start, and I'm hoping to be able to launch that on March 8th.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs. Members of the media, as Dr. Sock has no further questions, this does bring us to the end of the question and answer session. Members of the media, thank you once again for joining us. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021. For rebroadcast, tune into St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM, the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin, the YouTube channel Government of St. Martin, and St. Martin Cable TV channel 115. For video on demand, log on to the official government's website at stmartingov.org. On behalf of the Department of Communication and the Government of St. Martin, I'm Rolika Roach and wishing you a pleasant day further.